My name is Jennifer Scurro. I'm Director of the Women's Studies Program. I'd like to welcome you tonight to the Dowell Lecture. I want to thank first the faculty in Women's Studies and the committee that worked so hard for bringing this kind of programming and helping and supporting. And I also want to thank Dean Thompson and the office. Everyone has been so helpful in getting programs like this promoted and advocates for these kinds of events. So I just want to say thank you first and foremost to everybody there, Barbara and Gina. Tonight's lecture, the annual Dowell Lecture, is possible because of George Dowell. He gave an endowment in honor of Elvira M. Dowell, who was a student of the School of Arts and Sciences in 1936. So Women's Studies really gets the benefit of this annual lecture, and we really love to see some fun, exciting, interesting programming for our students. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, those of you that are here, I hope you will promote a little further a couple of other events that will be happening this semester. The first one I want to mention is an event being put on by Dr. Rowland's students in Women Gender Power. It's an open mic event to discuss what it means for women to be women in an American culture. Ain't I a Woman? I love these posters, by the way. So if you see them around campus, it's going to be April 5th from 12 to 2 in the dining hall of SEC. So that sounds like a really exciting event. Just I like the idea of open mic too. So bring your voice, bring your friends' voices, see if we can make some noise. The other event I'd like to mention is the Women's Studies Film Festival. There was an effort to really put together a series of films that address anti-bias, anti-hate issues surrounding sexuality. We have one more event planned, which is for May 6th. Originally, we had promoted it for Rent, but I think we're going to show a film that didn't get to run. It was supposed to run in March, a film called Fire, and it's a film that had been banned in India, but it's provocative and controversial and should be a lot of fun. So please tell people about this. And again, as usual, it'll be a bring your own treats and then a discussion, hopefully, and a raffle. There's a movie ticket raffle. So spread the word. And look for the posters. And if you see the posters, you are welcome to vandalize them and correct them and write on them and put that this movie's going to be. I'm totally open to that. So tonight, for our business at hand, I'm so pleased to introduce you to Dr. Emilie Zaslow, Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at Pace University. Her talk tonight, Making Sense of Feminism in 2011, draws from her recently published book, Feminism, Inc., Coming of Age in Girl Power Media Culture. In Feminism, Inc., Dr. Zaslow explores how a diverse group of New York City teen girls understand femininity and feminism in the contemporary media environment. She also offers a critical account of the girl power movement, using pop music and television, describes how teen girls make sense of and negotiate girl power. She looks at how girl power constructs new cultural narratives of femininity, and how at the same time the movement fails to offer strategies for real social change. Tonight, Dr. Zaslow will be discussing some of what she discovered in the process of this book, researching it and writing it, and she gives us 3 questions to consider in relation to this topic tonight. 1, what does contemporary feminism look like? 2, how do we make sense of feminist images in the popular media? And 3, do we still need a feminist movement? I think, as Director of Women's Studies, and that's about all the authority I have on this, these questions are really important to ask. And not just tonight, but after tonight. Dr. Zaslow, we look forward to your response on asking these questions and answering them and discussing them. But afterward, I hope you continue this conversation with your friends, with your teachers. Keep asking about what feminism means and if we still need a feminist movement. As a women's college, I think this is a conversation we need to make less muted and more active. Also, Dr. Zaslow, I would hope that you also discuss with us tonight when you get a chance, maybe after, when we get toward the Q&A, some of your newer research. Right now she's working on the experience of mothering in a digital culture, which is also quite relevant to our students and our faculty. We love talking about these things. So I ask that if you don't mind, turn off your cell phones. Stay for the Q&A, and then stay for the hot chocolate and coffee service that hopefully will be in the lounge when we're done. Thank you so much, and enjoy. Dr. Zaslow.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, and to thank Jennifer Scurro and the Women's Studies Committee at the College of New Rochelle for inviting me to celebrate Women's History Month with you and to look forward to the future of feminism and women's studies with you. So we're talking today about contemporary feminism, right? About feminism in 2011, what it looks like, how we can make sense of the feminist images we see in media, and what the relevance is for feminists of your generation and maybe your offspring. And I'm focusing tonight on US feminism particularly, just to make that clear, with the recognition that there are feminisms outside of the United States that have their own issues and their own frameworks and own definitions. And I want to start by exploring what feminism actually is, to know what we mean when we say feminism. And that's challenging because there is no one answer to what feminism is. It's also challenging because in today's popular discourse and our social conversation about feminism, there's an inherent contradiction. I mean, how can we even be sure about what feminism is and how we identify with feminism when one of today's most progressive spokeswomen isn't sure what she thinks of feminism at all? And I'm talking about Lady Gaga, right? In an interview 2 years ago, a journalist asked her if she worried that audiences were less interested in her music than they were in her sexuality. Lady Gaga became very angry, and in what I would consider a true feminist fashion, she argued that the journalist was assuming a double standard. She said, if I were a male rock star, you wouldn't be asking me that. You would be saying he's a rock star. But because I'm a woman, because I'm a, in her words, sexual, strong woman who speaks her mind, you're asking me if my sexuality is distracting. So the journalist's follow-up question was, are you a feminist? And Lady Gaga said, and this is 2 years ago, Lady Gaga said, I'm not a feminist. And then equating feminism with man-hating, she continued, I hail men, I love men, I celebrate male culture and beer and bars and muscle cars. Which I love that she has the rhyme and the lyrics already written for something. But so not only does she stereotype, thank you, thanks. Not only does she stereotype all American men as beer-guzzling NASCAR fans, but she's casting all women who identify with feminism as man-haters. Only a few months later, though, Gaga told another journalist that she considers herself a little bit of a feminist. And this was because, she said, she sees herself as a liberating force who wants women to know that, what she says, when I say to you there is nobody like me and there never was, that is a statement I want every woman to feel and make about themselves. So Lady Gaga's not quite sure what a feminist is or if she's a feminist. Beyond that, there's a real inherent contradiction in her visual image. She's pro-sex, and she celebrates her own sexuality in a way that might make older feminists uncomfortable, and I include myself in the older feminists. Although I sometimes look like I'm a younger feminist, I'm actually an older feminist. So she might make some older feminists uncomfortable, but at the same time, she's embracing some of the visual codes of normative femininity. She's also challenging those same images, right? She constructs herself in a very androgynous way. And so she's challenging femininity at the same time as she's promoting normative femininity. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of us base our political or social identities on what the latest pop star has to say. But we do know from years of theorizing in so many different fields, in anthropology, sociology, women's studies, media studies, and so many other areas of research, that our identities are produced in culture. Right? We negotiate our identities in dialogue with the ideologies, both the dominant ideologies and the transgressive ones that we encounter. And pop culture and media are two of the ways in which we encounter the ideologies of our culture. And young people today, we know, are spending an increasingly huge amount of time with media. In a study released last year, the Pew Foundation found that 8 to 18-year-olds devote an average of 53, 8 to 18-year-olds devote an average of 53 hours per week to entertainment media, and that includes TV, movies, computers, video games, music, and when you add in multitasking, which most young people do, they're watching television while they're texting, that increases the amount of time they spend with media per week. So, and that was a study of 8 to 18-year-olds, but we know, of course, that media use starts much, much earlier. In fact, a few months ago, Disney, or maybe even a few weeks ago, Disney announced that it was going to start marketing to women in maternity wards, parents in maternity wards, that they were going to start offering branded onesies and formula to parents so they could hook them early on the Disney experience. And they said something like, if we can get them to start thinking about their first Disney trip when they're in the hospital, then we've got them hooked. So we know that we make sense of the world through our relationships with and encounters with media, and we know that this happens early, and we know that Lady Gaga, for example, one cultural icon, isn't sure what feminism is. But Lady Gaga is, of course, not alone in her confusion about feminism, because what mass media has to say about what it means to be a feminist today is filled with contradiction. And in the book, and in general, I call this moment of contradiction, the moment of girl power media culture. By this, I don't mean the 1990s brand of Spice Girls girl power. They did make the term a household name, but the slogan really caught on and really represents a cultural moment in which there's an imperative for female empowerment to be mixed with girlishness, an imperative for our demands for independence and agency to be mixed with sexual objectification. In short, what girl power does is it encourages girls and women to identify both as traditionally feminine objects and at the same time as powerful agents with choice and freedom. You probably are familiar with the girl of girl power. She's in every major media text, or at least every medium. She was in Bring It On, she was in Sex and the City, she's at the MTV Music Awards, she was in the recent film Love and Other Drugs. She's everywhere, and probably even some of you in this room are girls of girl power media culture. The girl of girl power media, to define her, to give a sense of who she is, she believes that she should be treated as an equal to her male peers, that she should be in control of her own body, that she is entitled to play tough and be smart, that she can and will support herself financially, and that her future should be self-determined. Furthermore, she believes she has a core of inner power on which to draw if she has to combat discrimination, and that she directs her own life. But these feminist sensibilities are shrink-wrapped with a femininity that's required of her, a feminine styling. She's always made up. Her hair is brushed or blown out or straightened. Her eyebrows are threaded or waxed or tweezed. She's got the right shoes. She's thin. She's well endowed, or she's wearing a push-up bra to make it look like she's well endowed. She's got normative beauty, and she's working to maintain it. She flaunts her sexuality, and she revels in the desire that her sexuality elicits. She feels that she must be a superwoman who is not only a professional, but also a mother. Not only a mother, but also a sexual tease. The girl of girl power must accomplish this all at once, with no blueprint for how to do it. And we'll get back to this idea of blueprint later, but I want to stick with defining feminism a little bit more. The other reason that defining feminism is difficult to do is because feminism in girl power media culture is not just contradictory, it's flexible. It gives girls the sense that they can choose when to be girly and when to be powerful, when they want to be a mother and when they want to be a professional, when they want to be sexy for male pleasure and then when they want to be sexy for their own pleasure. In girl power media culture, girls can play with power, taking it on and off at will. If you want to see a great example of this, look at Beyonce, the image of a woman who takes her power on and off at will. In 2008, she released the record, I Am Sasha Fierce. This is her latest record, if any of you are familiar with her. This side of the room, probably. This side? Okay, great. Okay, so in her lyrics for the first release, If I Were a Boy, she vacillates between what she would do if she were an insensitive man. This is supposed to be the man she knows. The idea in the song is that all men are insensitive. and what she would do if she were the kind of man who respects women and who strives for equality in a relationship. And this is the man she would be if she were a boy. She concludes the song with the condemnation of insensitive men. And she says, and this is the lyrics, I'm not going to sing it because you don't want to hear me sing, but you're just a boy, you don't listen to her, you don't care how it hurts. And here we hear her full of power, right? She's got the power to talk back. She's talking back to the man who says, I'd put myself first. This is the lyrics. I'd put myself first. I'd make the rules as I go. She's talking back to him. In her video, she's wearing a police uniform. So she's kind of doming the state power, the official power. She's got power there. She has power to name, albeit the misuse of power, to name insensitivity as part of a male generalized identity. We also see her powerful in the video for Diva, another song off the same record. She symbolically sets fire to mannequins, and these mannequins are heavily made up and she lights them on fire. Or in the lyrics to Single Ladies, another song, where she announces to an ex-lover who now wants her back, I put gloss on my lips, a man on my hips, I could care less what you think, I need no permission. This is an empowered woman, right? This is a woman that some of the women's studies professors are talking about. She lights mannequins on fire. That's a symbolic rejection of normative beauty. It's a symbolic rejection of the silencing of women. Mannequins can't talk. She's not waiting by the phone for her ex to call. She's not crying if she wants to. She's doing, as she says, her own little thing. She's gone out. She needs no man's permission. And yet here comes the contradiction and the flexibility to put feminism on and take it off at will. Beside the declaration of female agency, we're presented with the contradictory line repeated over and over in the song's chorus. And if you don't know the song, let's see. Okay, so it's called, anybody want to sing it? It's called Single Ladies, Put a Ring on It. Okay? If you like it, the chorus is, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. I said I wasn't going to talk, but you get it. Okay, I sing. If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it, right? So in that phrase that she repeats over and over and over again, she rhetorically positions herself as an object, as much of an object as the mannequin that she burns. It is not a person, certainly not one with agency. Is it her sexuality? Is it her body? Is it her finger? Is it her commitment? Any way you look at it, Beyonce becomes an object, not an agent in this relationship. And yet another contradiction. Even if it is her finger, and we can call it digit it, the song establishes marriage and the ring as the ultimate goal for a woman. And yet another contradiction. Beyonce does pole dances in some of her live shows. She's choosing to perform in the role of the adolescent male fantasy, of a glamorous stripper, despite the fact that studies suggest that dancers in strip clubs are often living in poverty, survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and victims of abuse in their clubs. She's doing what Rosalind Gill calls internalizing the objectifying male gaze. So how do we make sense of all of these contradictions and of this kind of flexible feminism that can be worn like clothes or like jewelry to suit a mood or to suit a video? And by the way, an interesting fact is that Beyonce does call herself a feminist. But it's not exactly clear that she understands what she means when she says it. The one quote in which she's identified as a feminist is, I think I'm a feminist in a way. It kept me out of so much trouble and out of bad relationships. My friendships with girls are just so much a part of me that there are things I could never do to upset that bond. I never want to betray that friendship because I love being a woman and I love being a friend to other women. So being friends with women is sort of her definition of feminism. So because we understand not only who we are, but what words and concepts mean as we engage with culture, these contradictory messages can be confusing for old women, older women, younger women, for men, for women. So a few years ago, I set out to find out, in particular, how young women made sense of the representations of women they were seeing in girl power media culture. And there was already a lot of talk, both scholarly and in popular press, about girls in media. But so much of the discussion was characterized by moral panic. There's panic dating back to the 1960s about Barbie. Some of you may be familiar with it. Barbie teaches normative beauty, teaches us that girls should be in the home, that domesticity is the role for women. She's got her dream house. She does have her Jeep, but it's also pink, right? So teaching us that certain colors are associated with girlishness. She's imbalanced physically, so teaching us about sexual objectification, heteronormativity. She's always got Ken with her. Teaches us that blonde whiteness in particular is a standard for feminine beauty, and that anorexic thinness paired with large breasts becomes the object of male desire, as Steinberg says. There was moral panic in the academic world about magazines like 17, that they're also teaching heteronormativity, that they're teaching us that grooming and fashion are the things that girls should be concerned about, that they're making our daughters vapid. More recently, there have been fears about artists like Katy Perry and Kesha, that they're, as one Wall Street Journal blogger says, they're upping the ante on peddling exaggerated sexuality to American teens. And there's fear that shows like Gossip Girl sexualize young women and celebrate sex as a way to gain status, social approval, and personal satisfaction. These panics may or may not have some truth to them, but one thing that none of them does is consider how media is negotiated. The panics overemphasize the role of media in the formation of girls' identity projects because they rely exclusively on textual analysis or content analysis. So in other words, they're looking specifically at the texts. They're looking at, an adult woman is looking at a Barbie and trying to make sense of how a young girl makes sense of Barbie. A young woman is a scholar is reading 17 magazine, or a journalist is listening to Kesha and making determinations about their impact on teen girls. But almost none of them talk to teen girls and find out what the roles are in their own lives. How do girls make sense of these things? And while I said we come to know who we are in culture, it's not like it's a magic bullet that injects us and suddenly we, are dupes and think exactly as the culture tells us to think. We're also individuals who negotiate, who have a history, a background, and either a religious background, a personal background, a family background, an educational background, and all of those things impact how we make sense of the media that we see. So I decided to talk to young women about these images. What did they see when they watched people like Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, when they watched the Parkers TV shows, Charlie's Angels? Some of these are a little bit older because the book, of course, was published in 2009, but they're still very relevant. So I interviewed 70 girls. I had focus groups and interviews with them. They were all, as Jennifer said, girls from New York City. They were all in high school, either in public, Catholic, or independent high schools. And they were a diverse group, both racially and socioeconomically. So I started out just by asking the girls, in terms of the questions about feminism, asking the girls who they would identify as feminists in pop culture, either television characters, pop stars, or celebrities specifically. And then I asked them how they defined feminism and whether they thought there was relevance for feminism in their lives. So what I discovered is that they do think that feminism is still relevant. They do see themselves as living in a world in which there is discrimination. The discrimination plays out mostly, in high schools where the boys want to watch the boys' basketball team, but nobody will ever come to see the girls play basketball. Or they think that, I've had that experience. Or they think that girls can't drive, and they make derogatory jokes about how girls can't drive. But they still see that there is a difference in the way boys and girls are treated. At the same time as they see that it's relevant, many of them distance themselves from the word. They are afraid of how others are going to define the word, and then how others are going to define them based on their notion of themselves as feminists. And interestingly, and this is the thing I'm going to talk a little bit more about, many of them think about feminism quite differently than I do. Those who think about feminism and are able to identify, which most of them could identify someone in pop culture who is feminist, but they think about feminism very differently, because for them, feminism is less about the change that we usually identify with social movements and is more about identity. Their feminism is missing this blueprint that I was talking about before, a blueprint that really could help them to see a path that would allow them to be some of the things they want to be: mother and professional, sex goddess, powerhouse, beautiful, strong, connected. When I ask girls to define feminism, they primarily use the language of liberal feminism, so a language about talking about rights. And they specifically focused on the rights of women to vote, to have equal pay, focusing on the rights of women to choose, specifically regarding sexual identity and reproductive rights. Within this framework, however, the girls have divergent views on the role of the feminist. While some girls believe that being a feminist means being vocal about your beliefs on these rights issues, many others feel that a feminist is someone who embodies and enacts feminist ideals and values, even if she doesn't work for change. In the latter case, this woman might just represent a woman who is strong and empowered. She's not a woman who fights for the maintenance or expansion of the rights that these girls were talking about. She just uses those rights. She enacts her own choice, but she doesn't make sure that the choice is there for other women. As a representation of strength and power, this is a woman who performs feminism. And I'll give you a sense of what this conversation sounds like between girls. So I'm going to tell you about Jenna and Simone, who are two 14-year-old girls who discuss in this scene I'm going to play out for you. They're discussing whether certain film characters should be labeled feminists. And this is, in this case, they're talking about Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. I can kind of situate the text for you a little bit for those of you who haven't seen Legally Blonde. Elle Woods in Legally Blonde is a former sorority president who appears to be focused on fashion, all things pink, and getting her nails done. Right? She loves the beauty salon. When she discovers that her college boyfriend is heading to Harvard Law to go to law school and that he's looking for somebody less blonde and more serious to marry, she studies for the LSAT, does really well, gets into Harvard Law, follows him there. She tries to first do really well there to impress him so he'll realize that she is very smart and should be his wife. But at the end of the day, she kind of ditches him, realizes that she loves the law, but she also uses her own common sense and her sense of fashion and the sorority skills that she's attained in order to solve an important case for him, for one of her professors, rather. And in the sequel, which came out in 2003, Legally Blonde 2, Red, White, and Blonde, Elle learns that she has this little chihuahua, and she learns that the chihuahua's mother is being used for animal testing. So she leaves her job as a lawyer, goes to be a congressional intern in Washington, and tries to pass a bill banning animal testing. So Jenna and Simone are discussing the character of Elle. And to Simone, who thinks of a feminist as someone who fights for women's rights, Elle may be an animal rights activist, but she's not a feminist. She's not a feminist because she's not fighting for the rights of women. So Jenna counters, and she says, even if Elle isn't fighting for women's causes, she's kind of seen as a feminist because she worked her way to the top. So that makes her, even if she didn't want to be, it does slightly make her a role model and a feminist, even though maybe she didn't start out that way. And Simone counters, but a feminist is someone who will stick up for the rights of other women, but when you're independent like Elle, you're only sticking up for yourself. Like, it's sort of like a self-preservation in a way. And like with feminism, being a feminist, you're more standing up for other people and other women, not just yourself. So we hear in this discussion, we can hear these different perspectives on feminism. One group of girls, like Simone, believe that feminist is a characterization that should only be given to women who are active in their resistance to patriarchy. That women who are seeking to make change for women collectively, not just women who live the role of an empowered woman. For these girls, a feminist is an activist who fights for women's rights with her voice or her body or her money or her time. And feminism in this model is an activist identity. But there's another group of girls like Jenna who believe that to be identified as a feminist, a woman simply needs to be independent, be strong, be empowered, or be self-determined. These girls often imply, as Jenna does here, that the feminist performs her powerful position for others to see and therefore serves as a role model. But they don't really see it as a social change identity. They see it as a performative identity, performing the woman's strength. So feminism becomes a cultural identity that's shaped by cultural practices rather than a political movement shaped by political practices. It becomes an individual marker rather than a collective strategy. So I want to focus a little bit more on the second idea, the idea that Jenna has about feminism, because in my classes at Pace, I just see this more and more, this way of identifying feminism as a person, a woman who just enacts that role. So another way of looking at it is the way 15-year-old Grace was looking at it. She was looking at women like Angelina Jolie and Tomb Raider and the women of Charlie's Angels. And for her, they were feminist because they demonstrate an ability to fight on par with men. And because they're the saviors rather than victims in their movies. The women of Charlie's Angels demonstrate to Grace that they are feminists because they can save the world and not back down. For Grace, who at 15 refuses to wear skirts and prefers to play first-person role-playing computer games more than doing anything else, the angels represent a rejection of the weakness that she sees that's associated with traditional femininity in her world, despite the fact that there have been a lot of critiques about the way that the Charlie's Angels do embrace femininity, that they're scantily clad, that they're very much provocative. But for her, that was sort of irrelevant. It was the fact that they performed the strength. Another example is the way that a young woman named Kiana talked about Oprah Winfrey. She called Oprah a feminist because of the way in which Oprah represented herself. Some of the girls who were more like Simone, there were a group of girls who found evidence of Oprah's feminism in the fact that she builds schools for girls, that she talks about gender issues on her show. But for Kiana, Oprah was a feminist because she performs the role of independence. Kiana says, Oprah represents herself as a black woman out there. It's the representation that was important for her. In some ways, to me, it's exciting that the girls in my study are seeing feminists everywhere. They're looking around and they see all these powerful women and they think, like, that's great, there are all these feminists. So, I mean, that sort of counteracts the Lady Gaga man-hating kind of feminist. You know, not all feminists have to have hairy armpits, not all feminists are lesbians, not all feminists are wearing plaid shirts. You could be, you know, look like anything, you know, the t-shirts that people wear saying this is what a feminist looks like, and you could look like whatever you want to look like and still be a feminist, still have these beliefs. But I do have a concern about this way of looking at feminism, and is that feminism becomes an individual identity, and it's not a political movement, it's not a collective social change. The woman who has achieved the power, right? And it could be any of us. It could be, I have achieved something because I'm standing at the podium. So does that mean that I do not need to care about other people, other women who haven't gotten to the podium yet, right? I think I do, and that's part of what collective social change is. But if it's just an individual identity, that I'm done when I get to the podium. This feminist doesn't have to be concerned with women who haven't achieved what she's achieved. They don't have to be concerned with women who have less. They don't have to be concerned with women who have not made it out of poverty, with women who face discrimination in the workplace, with women who are victims of domestic violence, with women whose access to cancer and HIV screenings may be limited because federal funding is going to be pulled for Title X. The definition, or hopefully it won't, but if it passes in the Senate, which it probably will not, the definition proposed by these girls is deeply rooted in a whole media culture that started at the moment when media really began to co-opt feminism, right, and commodify it. And we can see, if we look at television narratives dating back to the 1970s, that when we see characters who we would define as feminists, it's really about exploring their own personal struggles rather than exploring their beliefs or acts. We see individual women's struggles for self-actualization and success rather than looking at this collective politics. Focus on the problems experienced by individual women rather than on systems and structures that oppress women and that perpetuate inequities. In the girl power media environment in which the girls in this study live and make sense of gender identity, feminism continues to be represented by these codes that signify a certain kind of lifestyle or identity rather than a political stance. I think a really interesting way of looking at it is to use social theorist David Harvey's discussion of Epcot Center. So he talks about that in a late capitalist culture, right, which we're living in now, that there's this huge focus on the individual, and that it puts us, as he says, it puts us at risk of experiencing life vicariously, but not having to make sense of the structures in which the life that we're living take place in. So he uses the example of Epcot Center, and he says, you know, you can go to Epcot Center and eat at well, he doesn't use these names because I looked them up last night to see what people are really eating at Epcot Center. People are eating, you know, in France at Patisserie Boulangerie. They're eating in Mexico at Cantina de San Angel. They're eating in China at Lotus Blossom. And we can go to all these places. We can visit Disney and we can go to China. We can go to Mexico, but we don't need to really think about the authenticity of that experience. We don't need to think about who's preparing the food, right? What their wages are, what their work conditions are. We don't need to think about what's happening to the people in those lands right now, human rights violations in China, drug trade in Mexico. We don't need to be concerned with the accurate representation of the culture. Instead, Disney visitors can comfortably try on cultural travel and difference while staying in the safety of the Disney realm. So if we use this same analogy to look at feminism and girl power media, we might say that just as people can experience the world for a day without actually having to go there, people can experience feminism without actually having to go there. They can try it on. They can put it on at will and take it off at will. And they don't have to know the history of feminism. They don't have to know the struggles that women have been through to get young women to where they are today, where we do have, you know, more women in college than men, even at non-women's colleges. I think it's about 60, somewhere between 60 and 66% of college undergraduates are female now. They don't have to think about the continuing material and ideological inequities faced by women, nor do they need to think about these strategies for changing, right? Because if we just boil it down to a personal individual struggle, then there doesn't need to be any strategy for change. It just means I need to go to college and do my thing and do me. So feminism as an identity, as equated with individual achievement, loses its focus on change, on the need for revisions in laws and policies, on the need for revisions in cultural representation, on the need for equity in resources. The kind of feminism we see in girl power media culture, it fails to make girls aware of the range of social strategies for social change. Girls simply see a woman who's gone on her own path. They don't know what direction this path has taken. Sometimes we see some bumps in the road, but they're an individual woman's struggles. They're not systematic bumps. They're not structural bumps. And then when we do see these individual success stories, we don't ever then get a blueprint for how we can make this success possible for all women. And that's what happens when a social movement becomes a commodity. It's happened with other kinds of social movements as well. But I want to end kind of on an optimistic note, because I think that there's room for a kind of feminism that's collective in pop culture and mass media. What if Elle Woods, you know, Legally Blonde 3, what if she mobilized her sorority sisters to rally for a new parental leave policy that doesn't place the United States as, you know, one of 2 industrialized countries that doesn't provide paid maternity leave? What if Whitney Port from MTV's The City, who has an internship at a women's magazine, or Mercedes from Glee, or any other young woman had a storyline in which viewers were made aware that the wage gap is still, or was the last big study this year, is still about 75 cents to the dollar across the board for equal work and equal education? What if we saw the life that a woman who's a surgeon like Miranda Bailey on Grey's Anatomy Or Julia Braverman on parenthood. What if we saw, and they're also mothers, what if we saw their real life? What if we saw what it's like to be a working mother and go home and have to deal with your family and kids who are, coming at you? What if they showed what the statistics tell us, that employed wives spend 40 more minutes of time than their male counterparts doing household activities, right? This kind of second shift, doing the cooking, doing the housework, doing the household management. I don't write for television. I don't know how to write for television, but I am an avid TV watcher. I have to be. I'm in communication studies, media studies. I always use that as my excuse, so I watch a lot of TV. And what I think is if the writers of Glee can make us laugh and sing and cry to stories about teen pregnancy, stories about excessive drinking, stories about gay bullying, then surely they can make us laugh and cry and sing about stories about feminism and feminist social change. Because as Lady Gaga put it when she finally did identify as a feminist last year, and I don't usually end speeches with quotes by Lady Gaga, but it works well. So when she did come to terms with the definition and the identity as a feminist, she said, all of the avant-garde clothing and musical style and lyrics that at one time was considered shocking or unacceptable, it's now trendy. Perhaps we can make women's rights trendy. Strength, feminism, security, the wisdom of a woman. Let's make that trendy. And I hope that we can. Thank you. I'm gonna come down there. Maybe we'll see if my voice can you guys hear me if I come down here? Yeah. That's the way I can have a conversation. So any questions? Oh, is that gonna screw up? Okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts, questions, we can have a discussion about what feminism should be or looks like.
I can't help thinking the Sarah Palin question, because there was just this recent, kind of buzz about the fact that she was using the word feminism, the grizzly mom thing. I don't know, because the Lady Gaga image, I've used it myself, because it's over the meat suit. Did me in. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fit around this meat suit she wore because it was so strange. The Sarah Palin actually, I think, is even stranger. Any comments like what when you heard that? Was that how did you absorb some of that?
I mean, I think she falls into that same category of a woman who is using the identity of feminist but doesn't believe in collective social change for women. She may think of her own success in politics as a feminist success, but what has she done? I mean, looking at her record, what has she done to help women's lives, to improve women's lives, to make social change? I don't think her record is that strong, from my perspective. So I would see her as somebody who's using that identity marker as a way to, for her as a way to bring in some votes, but is not really it's not a political identity.
I think she's using some of the mother image as a way of saying, women as mothers need that, need something to latch on to, need more identity, more promotion. So arguably she could be seen as a feminist in the way she promotes the role of mothering and that kind of thing, which might, again, be a whole different kind of idea of what feminism's job is today, what work it's supposed to be doing.
Right, but then at the same time, and I don't remember the exact details, but I think at the same moment that she was talking about her son's syndrome and sort of promoting, that strong mothers and, who are taking care of their children with special needs, and that, it's okay for me to bring him on the road and he's part of our family. At the same time, there was funding cut in her state for early intervention programs for children with disabilities. So, put your policies where your mouth is. Like, you can talk about being a grizzly mother, but what are you doing? Because if you're cutting early intervention programs, then you're just making mothers have to work more to bring their children, to bring developmentally delayed children up to speed. So I don't see her doing that. Put resources where your politics are, basically. Yeah. Right.
Well, as an old feminist who went to school here in the 70s, when we were fighting for this, I find this discussion disturbing. Because the whole point of it, before the expression was usurped by the reproductive rights, was choice. that women have a choice, and that was the whole point of the movement. Sarah Palin is as right for her choice as Lady Gaga is for her. That was the whole point. Not to hear you guys talking about this 40 years later is incredibly disturbing. That women should have whatever they want to do. Yes, if you want to be a political person, and I think Sarah Palin's making her choice as a Republican political person and not as a feminist person, that's perfectly all right. That's her choice. And the sad part is the distance between the late Geraldine Ferrara and Sarah Palin. That's what upsets me. What upsets me is that we haven't had any women in there fighting that battle, because it was never a collective thing, because you had to fight it alone. It was usually me and whatever my choice was in a room full of men. And that was the battle we had to fight. So we got a little disturbed when, women got very girly, and of course we never had sororities here. But to hear you even discussing this is incredibly disturbing. Women should be able to be whatever they want to be. And that was the whole point of it back in 1970. And hopefully in the 21st century, we shouldn't be discussing that.
Thanks for your comments. But I mean, one of the things I'm trying to get across is that I don't think girls do have a choice today. I think that they have to be strong and also beautiful. They have to be professional, but also are expected to be mothers. Being professional is not almost a choice anymore, because primarily for financial reasons. So they have to be both sexual objects and also agents, so that there's this imperative where that choice is not there.
But part of that, I find, and this is just in my 40 years of working, is because they compete against each other. They don't compete against men. Because if you're competing against men, that takes out the whole group that you can date and you can, whatever, in general. So the thing is, okay, there's the 2 seats for women, so we're fighting over that instead of trying to usurp. I just made the comment when you first came in, isn't it interesting the only 2 men here came and sat in the middle and commanded the whole place. Now, why didn't you guys come and sit in the middle? Because you want to escape, I know, very thing. But that's always been, and I happened to do it in the martial arts, where I was always the only woman and had to fight my way, literally where they would hide us, because the YMCA, where I was studying, the men didn't like the men running on the track. We had to wait and be brought up, and you had to do push-ups if you were late for class. It didn't matter how early I was for class, because they had to bring us up into the gym, because it was the YMCA. We never, I was always late, always had to do 50 push-ups before class. I got really good upper body strength, but those were the things that women still compete against other women. There's still the little niches that you can be in. The blonde niche, the brunette, the original Barbie was brunette, so that you should know. My original Barbie was brunette. She wasn't blonde until later. That we still put people in, women into these little peggy things, and this is the 2 seats that you, on the board or on anything that you can compete on. And the only thing, I grew up in a feminist household, but I have 3 brothers who were sexist pigs. But my mother was a feminist, and they must have absorbed it, because when they all had daughters, it's amazing how they changed their tune, and it wasn't until they had daughters that they really changed their tune. But interestingly, women do make less. So, there are 2 observations on that. One is they were less hard hit by all these layoffs in the last couple of years. Because if you have 2 people, who are you going to keep? The person you're paying less. So it was the men who got fired. And the other thing is when women, and they've proven this in the Soviet Union when there are many more women, almost all the doctors are women, instead of raising the status of women, it lowers the profession.
Right.
So doctors don't have in the Soviet Union any prestige. And that's happening sort of, well, lawyers never had any prestige. They just made a lot of money. But now there are more women in law school, more women in everything else. It is not raising the status of women, it is lowering those things. And as a person who's in a union, 100 years after the Triangle fire, what's the big talk? Get rid of the unions, get rid of this, get rid of everything. So, you know, it's very difficult. Women have to, I agree with you, but everyone has to fight for everything that they have now. I mean, it isn't a given for anyone.
But that's young women do think it's a given for them and that they don't. I mean, that's generally that young women, but I'd love to hear from the young women who are here tonight. But I mean, in my research, that young women do feel like it's something they've been born into, that they don't really need to fight for it. You know, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up unions because that is a perfect example of social collective change, right?
And now they're trying to get rid of it.
Right, and so, you know, yes, I think, you know, throughout history, anytime there's social political change, individual women or individual laborers have to, you know, speak up for themselves in any kind of environment. But we also, I think it's important for, you know, women of my generation and women of the generation who's in college now to think about the feminists who have come before us and have made social change. And that's not just individual change. We do see social change usually involves some kind of mass collective movement. So I mean, I think we need to see that today. I think young women, I would like to see young women identify what are some of the things, you know, if you want to be a superwoman, as, you know, if the requirement is that you have to, you know, be a professional, you have to be a mother, how is that going to happen? You know, when I talk to young women, they really can't, and this is particularly high school women, like they spend a lot of time thinking, like, am I going to stay at home and be with my child, or will I go back to work? How will I go back to work? I was just reading Us Magazine, because I'm a media studies person, I'm allowed to read that. I was reading Us Magazine on the way in on the train, and you know, there were all these pictures of, the big thing now is like these celebrity moms, right? So there are all these pictures of celebrity moms, and there were 3 pictures in which you could see the part of the body, a partial body of another adult in the picture besides the celebrity mom. Clearly the nanny or the babysitter or someone helping her, right? What if one of these mothers was a spokesperson talking about how important that extra help is and how most women don't get that extra help, or about how our child care policies and, you know, our subsidized child care in the United States pales in comparison to subsidized child care in many countries in the European Union, or about maternity leave, like I was talking about, paid maternity leave. We're one of 2 industrialized countries that does not have paid maternity leave. So,
but then they all go away.
What if
countries,
these women were talking about that? What if celebrities or storylines were discussing those things? Because, and apart from the celebrities and storylines, like what if young women were discussing those things? Because if you want to be a professional, and many of you want to be professionals and you want to have a family, how are you going to do it, right? It's very hard for the women who are doing it now. So instead of saying like, oh, I'm just going to have a hard life like the women who are doing it now, why don't you say, you know, here's my opportunity to make some change. These are some policies that need to be changed. This is a structural change. It's not just me, I personally have to deal with this hardship. We have to deal with this hardship. So let's look at what are some of the ways in which we can change these things so that my life and my daughter's life can make more sense.
Here.
I actually think this is a really interesting conversation because last semester I was in class and a question came up about whether people in the class identify themselves as feminists. I'm in SAS, so it was an all women's class. And everybody pretty much said, yeah, I'm a feminist, you know. Mm-hmm. And I had a hard time deciding whether or not I was gonna label myself because of the very reason, something you had mentioned was that, you know, not all feminists have to be men bashing or, you know, hairy armpit women, you know, things like that. But I think the image of feminism is that very thing. I mean, from my viewpoint, not saying that that's what feminism is, but the connotation that goes along with it, you know, is not always a positive one. But I think what, I'm sorry, what's your name? Sarah was saying about feminism, the point of it is, you know, women having a choice. I think that that's really important. And I was pretty much the only person in my class sort of arguing from that standpoint, because I am traditional in the sense that I do, you know, I want to be a mother, and when I have children, God willing, I will stay at home until I choose to go back to work. But it's because it's my choice. It's not because, you know, I'm lowering myself underneath a man's hand, or I need to be that stay-at-home mother because that's a woman's role. But that's something that I want to do as a woman, because I think that there's no greater career or job than to really rear someone and to love someone and to show them, you know, how to be that next great human being. But a lot of the people in the class were sort of saying, well, no, it's about social change, and if you're, you know, like, if you're not out there sort of rallying for change, then you're not doing anything. I said, but what about, you know, in the women's rights, in the women's suffrage movement, what about the women who were staying at home being supports to the women who were, you know, in the forefront? There have to be those women too. And I absolutely believe in equality. I absolutely believe in change for the better. I mean, from 3 different sides, I'm coming, you know, in as a minority. You know, I'm a woman, I'm black, you know, I have different things already that, you know, obviously sometimes put me at a disadvantage. And so obviously, you know, I am gung-ho for change and for social policy. And when I need to, I'm definitely avid, and I will get on a microphone, write a poem about it, speak about it, do what I have to do. But then at the same time, I feel like when it comes to another woman saying, well, you're not supporting women, or you're not a feminist because you're not out there, then you're taking away my choice. And then are you really a feminist? Because feminism is about allowing women to have a choice. And if you as a feminist take away my choice, then you're defeating the whole, you know? So I think that this conversation is interesting, and it brings up a lot of things for a lot of people. So.
And I think that's why also that notion of the feminist performed is problematic, because it's not about choice, it's about performing this role of strong woman, right, which means nothing. So do you have to be a professional, do you have to be an athlete, do you have to be, you know, sex goddess to be a strong, aggressive, and, you know, in the bedroom to be a strong woman? Can't you just choose to be who you are? That's what, right, and I think going back to this idea of, you know, saying that as a mother you can't be a change agent, I think is absolutely ridiculous. I was just telling Jennifer, right, a story about my son came home from school. He's 6 years old, and he came home from school yesterday and said, "Why, you know, what's with the whole ladies first thing?" And he didn't use that language, but he, you know, he's like, why, you know, in the gym they're making me do ladies first. Why do I have to do ladies first? So I was telling him, you know, you have to do ladies first because of people's antiquated views. You know, people people thought they were being kind, right? Because they thought that women were weak, and so they were being kind to women by saying, you know, you can't do it as well, or you're not as strong, so you go first. You know, we need to protect you. You go first. I said, but that's an old-fashioned view. They really shouldn't be doing ladies first. Maybe they should, they should do being light-colored shirts and dark-colored shirts, or red, you know, brown eyes, blue eyes, brown hair, whatever. You know, if you write with your right hand or you write with your left hand, come up with some other way of distinguishing that's not based on a gender stereotype. But I think, you know, having a and then of course I told him he has to follow the rules of school, and when he gets to be the gym teacher, he can make the rules that he wants to make about who goes first. But if it continues to happen, you know, I said, if it continues to happen, like, I will come into school and advocate for you, because that's not the way it should be. So I think, you know, being as a parent, I think is being like an amazing, the ability to be a change agent is amazing. And just because you're at home and not representing the strong woman in the workplace does not make you any less of a feminist or any less of a change agent. I think this idea of an activist, you know, that's why I use this idea of, I say she uses her time, her voice, her money to make change. And using your voice can be with your kids, using your time could be, you know, staying home and baking goods and bringing them to, you know, the local, you know, domestic violence shelter or whatever it is. You don't have to be out there like protesting. You don't have to be, you know, there are lots of different ways to be a change agent.
But 30 or so years ago, Gail Sheedy wrote Passages, and I think there's many, and now that we're living, my mother's 95, and you know, I work with seniors. The fastest growing part of the population are the 80 and 90-year-olds. And we have almost a whole other life from the last century when when my mother was born. And I think you're expecting too much of young women. We had to do it young because I graduated from CNR and had to go to Catherine Gibbs to get a job. I had to take their college graduate course to learn shorthand and typing. And so we were fighting just to have anything. When you have a choice, you know, and 20s is the new 10. And so you're right. Where you are, that's the right thing. You know, you don't know what you are yet. That's why you're developing. If you knew where you were, you wouldn't be, you know, in college or have to grow or anything else. And we all grow over all these generations. I just turned 60. I'm a different person than I was when I was 20 and I was here. And it's a whole different thing. And there are times in your life you can only have babies at a certain, well, no, that's not true because now they're having them at 60, but it's, you know, but who would want to? I don't know, but you know, there's the childbearing time, there's the school time, there's the childbearing time, there's the job time, there's all of this, and then maybe when they hit 40, they will understand, you know, and do, but I think, again, it's a matter of choice. There will be 20-year-olds who are politically active and then fall off when they're in their 40s. And there will be, you know, the little lollipop people who then get very serious in their 50s. Yeah, again, it comes back to me, to a matter of choice. And nobody is emotionally and politically at the same point at the same time. If there was, we could control the world better, but we can't.
I think it's say that we're expecting too much from young women these days, because first wave feminism, they dealt with, let's say, the right to vote, for example.
Oh, the right to vote, okay.
So you guys got that accomplished. Next wave, let's say, the right to choose, the right to take like, birth control pills. They got that. Next, wages, jobs, things like that. For the most part, that was accomplished. Women were kind of hired more equally to men. Look at what we're dealing with today. Like a young girl like me, I just came from my room watching, let's see, like Jersey Shore or something like that, you know? Like, I come from that, and then I come here and it's like, we're supposed to be saying that, yes, we expect more of the young feminists, because I could have just stayed in my room and watched the whole marathon of the damn show and just stay there and not do anything. So we do need to expect more of the young feminists of the day, because we have more we're against more, I feel. Like personally, I feel like we're up against a lot more. The suffragettes of that time, they were against a lot politically. Today we're against a lot more socially and by the media. And to me, I feel like that's more degrading and more in your face than the laws. Because after a time, people who didn't have the right to vote, they didn't know, they never had the right to vote. So not having the right to vote and then working towards that was a great accomplishment. In today's media, you get bombarded from everywhere. So it's like, how do I say this?
You can't prioritize or
know
what to resist and what to respond to.
Yeah,
well, my thought too is they have the right to vote, now nobody uses it.
Well, I went out to vote when I was 18.
Good.
I took my sister and I took my mom and I took my cousins and all of that, because I knew that social change was necessary. So there's a small minority of us that actually do put into practice what we want to happen, but also the feminists of today and the women who don't want to consider themselves feminists, and the women who don't even know what feminism is are under a lot of stress because we're told, everything tells us not to be a feminist. Like, I'm at home, I'm here, and I live in my dormitory is a single, and I could do whatever I want. I could put up posters of, in my room I have posters of Eve Ensler, Karen Carroll, like the vagina monologues, peace signs, all of this. But then I go home and I have to do the dishes, and my brother gets to sleep in his bed all day. And I have to do the laundry, and my dad gets to listen to music, and my mom has to cook, and they don't have to do anything. So it's like the contradictions of society make it harder to be a feminist today. So that's why we need to expect more of the feminists instead of the young feminists.
My father was a feminist. My father did the laundry, cooked, and did everything else.
Yeah.
The tragedy of that was that my father didn't have a mother growing up, which is why everybody had to do everything.
He learned those roles.
He didn't learn those roles because his father never remarried. His mother died when he was 2. And he lived out in South Dakota where there's so few people, you had to do, everybody had to do everything. And to this day in South Dakota, everybody has to do everything. But why did you become a feminist? How did you become a feminist?
I feel like I became a feminist because what I want to be, of who I want to be in life, and the things that I want to change. And I know that by being a feminist, I can affect change, like, more. I think identifying as a feminist and working towards something that would directly affect me and then affect those who I will bring into this world and affect those around me will be a better use of my life, instead of just doing something and not having like a goal or an aim or a path. I think by going to college, by letting my friends know, like, in my room, she's come to my room before. You know, like, in my room, it's a B word free zone. Like, and if we're talking about somebody, I always tell them, like, you know, let's do something else, because I'm affecting change in a small way, but in a continuous way. I try, anybody who I have a conversation with, I try to, you know, help them stray away from the B word, because if we say it to each other, people are going to say it to us. So I feel like affecting change little by little, step by step in my life, and labeling myself as a feminist is going to help me to make change in the world.
Bravo.
And I think, you know, I agree with you. It's not expecting too much of young women, and looking at the history of social change movements in the United States, it's very often the young people who are advocating for change. The civil rights movement and the gay rights movement and feminist movements, labor movements even, it's been young people, because young people have a lot less to lose, right? And they also have a little bit more time, less so today because so many young people who are going to college are also working. But they have a lot less to lose. Like it's not such a huge weight on their shoulders. And
I think what I meant, I didn't mean not to be expected of them, but not to look down on someone who hasn't made your choice, or hasn't evolved the way you have yet, or whatever. You know, where they are, to accept them where the level that they are in their life, and be who you are and represent without, as you said, it's to me, it's the same as calling them the B word. If you negate their choice. So I go back to what my original feminism always was choice, and that you hopefully are a little more, tolerant of people who didn't pick my way. You know, I didn't marry, I didn't have children, I went a different way. But my best friend has, 4 kids, and we grew, we have been friends since college, and she has a different life. But that doesn't make her less a feminist or me more a feminist. It just is different choices, and that was what the whole thing we thought was for.
I just had a question about when you had mentioned the story with your son, ladies first. Would you say that a woman, I mean, for me, and to me, I don't feel like I'm like lowering myself in any way by allowing this, but when I'm in a relationship, I allow him to open the door. I allow woman to open the door when I'm getting in the car, when I'm getting out, and hold the door when I'm, you know. And I expect that, actually, and I appreciate it when it's done, and I don't like it when it's not, you know. And I tell my brother, like if he's walking my little cousin, who's a girl, to the store, I tell him to walk on the outside, closer to the street. But I don't really feel like I'm instilling in him, you are higher than she is, or you're any better. But the reality is, in that situation, is that he is stronger than her. And if a car were like coming faster, he could push her a little bit, you know. Or I view women as queens. I honestly do. And when a queen walks into the room, there's a respect that comes with that. And I feel like a man holding the door or doing things like that is a respect for that woman, that queendom, you know. So would that be sort of, in your view, negating the feminist movement for equality? Because I don't really, I mean, I'm for, like, when it comes to rights and social change and progressive action, I'm all for it. But I don't really feel like, you know, by saying, hold the door or something to my brother for my sister, that I'm making him a macho and her a, you know, a weakness, right?
I mean, I think here's like an example of where choice is relevant, right? I mean, if we say, oh, we can let the women who want to use the B word use the B word and that's their free choice, to me, I think there is a point where choice ends, and it's no longer. I mean, the choice doesn't end. You always have the choice to do it, but I no longer think of that as, you know, anybody can do what they want. I think of it as degrading and oppressive. I don't think you making the choice to want somebody to do that for you is going to oppress me in any way. But I will say I like having the door open for me too. But I also like opening the door for my partner because it's always nice for people to have the door, hold the door for you. I don't want a door slamming in my face, right? So, I mean, I think as humans, as men and women, for me, from my perspective, we are equal. We're both humans, so I want to treat people with respect. And if that means that sometimes I'm buying dinner, sometimes the man is buying dinner, then I'm treating him with the, just like I love to get somebody to pay dinner for me, or, you know, treat me so nicely like a queen, that I want to do the same for him. So, to me, I do think of the ladies first thing as, I mean, what I try to do is I try to think of, you know, what are the roots of these things? Like, what's the root of, you know, the history of why a man would be holding the door for me? And to me, it is because the woman was weaker. It is a chivalrous thing. It's a kind of respect, but it's also
because the clothes were so onerous that she couldn't handle both or get through the door. And that's really the truth of it. It wasn't.
Well, why were the clothes so onerous? Because she had to stitch.
But that was only for a very small population of people. You know, most women were working the farms and doing the thing. That was Victorian times.
Right.
And when that came in, but that wasn't always. And why were the clothes so onerous? You know, you give a whole 4 years, don't you, to why the clothes were so onerous? I mean, that was the whole thing. And what have they done? They've gone right back to shoes that are this high, and basically, you know, it comes back. I mean, everything just comes back. When I was 30, I would have said, don't hold the door for me. I'm 60 now, please hold the door.
You know, I think we should all be, my feeling is we should all be holding the door for each other.
Absolutely.
We should also all be respectful.
And women and children first was the
totally
preservation of the species.
I mean,
Men can die.
everybody will tell you, like, I walk with a cane, and I had a walker, and if I saw somebody behind me, I would hold the door, male or female. But I'm just saying that, and I mean, and of course, if my boyfriend is behind me, I'm gonna hold the door for him. But I think, you know, I feel nice when my partner opens the door for me. I'm not saying that you shouldn't hold the door for him, or you shouldn't pay the bill sometimes. Like, go to Starbucks, I have my coffee, like, like, I have this. And our first date, he paid for the dinner, and then we went out at a cafe, and I was like, no, I have it, it's fine. So I get where you're coming from, but I was just wondering if that would be sort of
hypocritical. I don't think the of it is hypocritical. I mean, I think we all have to draw the line, if we want to be part of society, of the society we live in, we have to draw the line in different places, and we all make decisions. I mean, I always think, like, going back to, so I always talk about with my students, like, going, and I think about, like, what are the roots of it? It's like, we're going back to body hair, right? Like, do women, there's no reason, there's no reason why women shave their legs, right? Most women shave their legs, so not all women shave their legs, but there's no reason why we're wearing bras either. I mean, that's aesthetic. It has to do with the way.
Maybe for you.
And it has to do with the way in which women are, the cultural sort of imperatives for women. But I do shave my legs. I made that choice because I want to be part of wearing makeup. I do make the choice to wear makeup because I kind of see the fun in it. I do think it can be fun, and I also, when I go in for a job interview, I need to wear it, or else, like, there's a certain perception of me. So we all make choices where I think it's a lot about, like, knowing what your choices are and why you're making them, and, like, understanding the roots of why, things are the way they are, but recognizing that you're making choices within the social framework.
I think the first lesson that I learned from my first feminist class was in order to be like a feminist, you have to, or you should, accept the choices of other feminists. Because, like, as soon as you put down another person, another woman for their choice, or another man, because a man can be a feminist, another feminist for their choice, then you're, like, contradicting feminism. So, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, all of these, like, examples that you said, they're all in transition. Like, everybody's learning things. Because if you would have asked me what feminism was when I was, like, a freshman in high school, I would have had a completely different answer than what I have today. So yeah, Lady Gaga, she's a social, a person in the limelight, so she should be a little more versed in what she says and, like, the things that she says, but at the end of the day, we're all human. So the evolution of a feminist is more, I think should be placed, more importance should be placed on that than on the individual choices that I made a year ago than, like, today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, my point in using Lady Gaga and Beyonce is to show that for all of us who are media users, feminism becomes so confusing and murky because we see these very, like, stark contradictions within one person who may or may not define herself as feminist. But you have a woman like Beyonce who does say she's a feminist, but then what does it mean when she's dancing at a pole? To me, it's just so confusing. And I know for young women that I talk to, it's confusing too. So I'm just using them as, and I'm not critiquing them as individuals. And of course, we're all evolving. I think it's great that Lady Gaga has these 3 quotes within 2 years of each other, that she sees this transition. But I think of them as, like, good examples, trying to give, like, current examples of how this contradiction and this kind of flexibility of, like, I can be a feminist now, but not now. I can be a strong woman now, but now I'm a weak woman who's a damsel in distress. Like, that kind of back and forth within one entity is kind of confusing.
Doesn't Beyonce say Sasha Fierce is like another personality that she looks like?
Yes.
No, she does. She says
right.
that. And that's not who she is. That's her persona. And that she lives another life totally off stage. She wouldn't do those things. She said, I could never do those things like in real life or whatever.
Actually, she now says she's done with Sasha Fierce. She now can do those things. She
up.
just needed to have the I Am Sasha Fierce record, and now she can.
What I want to ask you about, I just want to start with, because the conversation is so interesting, one of the things I think I do with my classes and the way I think of feminism, and I'm a philosopher, so I have less of an excuse to watch all these things, although I do, which is, horrifies me, and I do feel awful and guilty, and that the images are so sneaky. and so suspicious. That's why I like the way you kind of unpack the lyrics of the song, because you tend to, like, when you see media, you just take it in. And you don't really have an opportunity to be aware of how it works on you, and how I really, really want to be a real housewife of New York City. And yet, that is absurd, because it's not even close to anything I am or would like or do. But I'm still attracted to these images, and yet at the same time, I'm like, it's trying to struggle for like an awareness or like a consciousness about how they work on not only me but other people. Like, I know it's totally absurd that these women, you know, raise these children, but they have like 4 nannies. Like, that's bizarre. And when you don't have help and you're trying to raise children and you have a job, that you literally feel yourself diminishing in terms of your energy and your personhood. So choice is like kind of a weird thing to say, because yes, I chose all these things, but my day-to-day living involves mostly just whatever crisis is immediately in front of me that I can manage before I go to bed. When that happens, I have no, you know, I like sleep 4 hours a night. So like choice kind of goes away, even though I have choice in the kind of general sense. I've chosen a lot of things in my life that I'm so proud of. My everyday choices are kind of being aware of like why I'm choosing and what I'm choosing and what it's based on. It's very hard work, and I feel like that's where my feminism has to be. Is like those little everyday choices, and am I really being awake or am I half asleep? Because most of the time I think I by no choice, and because I've taken on my sleep, I am half asleep. I'm a walking sleep person, sleep deprived person.
And like what I hope is that young women can start to see what, you know, women like you are doing, and say it's a choice within a social framework. It's a choice within a framework in which, so why I mean, one of the reasons why, you know, the justification for the fact that women still make 75 cents to the dollar is that they're not working the longer hours. Well, why aren't they working the longer hours? They're not working the longer hours because they have to get home and do the second shift at home with their kids. So if we took that away, and not to say that women don't want to be with their kids, or men don't want to be with their kids, but, you know, somebody's got to go home. So, you know, I mean, looking at all of these things together, the increasing number of hours, you know, I mean, we don't necessarily always think of this as a feminist issue, but the American, you know, work day and work week, the number of hours and expectations has increased. That is a feminist issue. You know, union rights are a feminist